Hey there! So today I'll tell you why orchid roots don't need light. This video will be a sort of an add-on to my main video on my main channel regarding decorative pots, so check that one out in the description. Right, so you might have heard that with orchids it's important to have a transparent pot so that the light goes through to the roots because the roots can photosynthesize. And while the roots can indeed photosynthesize, it is definitely not their main function, and actually they are trash at doing so in comparison to the wonderful leaves. To explain why this is, let's make an analogy. I love analogies. Consider the leaf as a solar panel. In essence, it kind of does the same thing. It transforms solar energy into a different energy, in our case, chemical energy. Through photosynthesis, orchids and plants in general prepare their food. Now consider their roots, solar cables. I don't even think such a thing exists because it's highly inefficient. But pretty much that's what it would be. If the leaf is a solar panel, the root is a solar cable. Now when you put it that way, you can start to see where the problem is. In order to accumulate as much solar energy, what you need is a wide surface. The bigger the surface, the more solar rays will fall on it. And if you think about a solar panel, you know that it's rather wide than thick. That's not random. The thicker an object is, the more it is likely that the layers underneath will not benefit from the same intensity of the sun. Definitely, the rays of the sun will not even reach it. And generally speaking, plant leaves and orchid leaves are generally wider than thick. When it comes to roots, we can see that the priority here is not being wide, but rather thick and kind of symmetrical in size. And well, this is because this is the proper shape and structure for the main functions of the roots, which are absorbing water and nutrients and also anchoring the orchid in our case. Photosynthesis is really not efficient in the case of roots. And in my experience, if an orchid loses all of its leaves but depends on the roots to give it energy, it will take a lot of time for it to snap back from the setback. This is because the roots simply are not efficient in producing food. Bottom line, structures that purposely evolved to do a certain thing will be very good at doing that certain thing, much better than other structures which might be capable of doing that thing, but it's not really their main feature. Now, I know that some of you will point out Nicosia orchids, which are orchids that do not produce leaves. They actually don't need leaves to survive, they need roots, and indeed the roots photosynthesize. And while that is true, it is also true that Nicosias do not produce leaves because they don't produce leaves. Mind blown, right? Let me explain what I mean. Let's go back to our previous analogy. Leaves are like solar panels. But see, orchids cannot really buy their solar panels from other plants. What they need to do is produce them. And leaves are one of the main consumers when it comes to energy. The production of leaves itself sustains the future production of leaves. It is impossible for an orchid to produce this amount of leaves at this size only using its roots. So obviously, if the orchid doesn't need to produce the leaves, it doesn't need to have leaves to have the energy to produce the leaves, right? So why don't all orchids go on the Nicosia principle? Why do you need the leaves in order to produce leaves? So spend all of this energy for what when you can easily survive only with the roots? Well, let me give you another analogy. Consider a leafed orchid like a self-sustaining, technologically enhanced house. When you have solar panels to produce energy, you can afford to have a fridge, an AC, a washing machine or two. You can afford to have a TV, plug in your electric car maybe. You can afford to have all of this technology, all of this progress in your house because you have the energy to power all of those things. And in the case of a leafed orchid, these luxuries or technological advancements translate to the flowers themselves. The bigger the flowers, the more complex the flowers, maybe even fragrant flowers, all of this energy gives the possibility to invest it into highly specialized other structures. Flowers are very important, particularly when you want to attract certain types of pollinators. Some orchids go to extreme lengths in specializing their flowers to attract a very specific pollinator. Production of those flowers takes a whole lot of energy which is produced by leaves. But we don't stop there. Sustained energy production can lead to technological advancements such as batteries. By having leaves, an orchid is possible to invest all of that energy into storage devices such as pseudobulbs. Pseudobulbs or canes are batteries for the orchid. These guys can store not only nutrients and energy, but also water. Some orchids have highly specialized storing devices. Some have highly specialized leaves, depending on what their environment requires. So having more energy obviously gives you a broader vision of how you can evolve, right? When you need to compete not only with other plants or other individuals from your own species, but also with pests and the human world, you kind of need to have some good adaptations, right? Well, producing leaves is the only way to ensure you have enough energy to invest in all of these advancements. This is the reason why there are more leaved orchid species than non-leaved orchid species. And yes, while the Nicosia can definitely survive as it isn't nearly as competitive as a leafed orchid. By the simple fact that this orchid grows through its leaves and it can direct its leaves to better capture sun rays or better reach the sun under the forest canopy, this gives a huge edge to these types of orchids. In some environments, orchids needed to produce leaves to compete, while in other environments, a small number of species didn't need to evolve these traits. Clear pots are super useful for growers, particularly for beginners, because you can see if the roots are okay, if the medium is dry or wet or broken down, and so on and so forth. When it comes to the orchid itself, it really doesn't matter all that much. When an orchid grows on a tree trunk, let's say, those roots go everywhere, including on the side of the tree that doesn't really benefit from a lot of light. It can also be very shaded or under other plants. The roots can actually grow under mosses or other plants growing and creeping along the trunk. They don't need to photosynthesize, they need to anchor the orchid. The leaves will stretch and will position themselves to better capture sun rays. And that's pretty much all the orchid needs. In the sad case of losing all of the leaves, maybe roots can give a little bit of an edge, but do not imagine it will be like, poof, my orchid is saved. No, there are many cases in which orchids completely deplete themselves without leaves, and there are also many cases experienced by myself as well, where orchids take years to fully recover and grow at a normal size after complete leaf loss. So bottom line, roots don't need light. Even if they start to grow very light colored, that's fine. They just don't have chlorophyll pigment because the orchid is not stupid. It's not gonna allocate chlorophyll pigments, which are energy consumers, into structures that simply don't have access to the light. Don't be scared if the roots are white. It's absolutely fine. They just need to be stiff and not mushy. And that's about it. Do watch my main video regarding decorative pots and how useful they are. Alrighty, bye.